So let's get started.
Let's get
Today's session
started.
is about group coaching. Why group coaching? Because it's interesting, because it's for people who, for example, can't afford to do one-on-one coaching. It's a nice alternative that's a little bit cheaper, but still gets results. It's used in systemic coaching. It's used outside of systemic coaching. It's used in teams. It's used outside of teams. It's pretty cool. Um, so and it's really hot right now. Anybody who's seen Zoolander will know the reference. Group coaching, it's so hot right now. Um, so today we're going to dive into group coaching. And I'm new to it too. So I'm going to ask quite basic questions, I think, because I'm coming from a space of, I've read a few things and that's about it. But, any of you, if you have particular questions as we go, please put them in chat. I do my best to keep track of them. And if we don't get to them, then I promise you that I will get Pooja to answer them in a blog post so that everybody's questions get answered. So without further ado, Pooja, I'm going to start with the basics. What is group coaching?
Oh, fantastic. So group coaching, as the name would suggest, voila, very simple, is coaching a group. So from one to many, as they say, what applies to one is then applied to a group of like-minded, similar interest people. So really, for those who are familiar with coaching, it's about creating that coaching space where there is that similar, focused goal setting, deepening of awareness, even say action planning and accountability. So all of that happens within similar groups. If I may then go on to say, asking the question of, so similar groups would be groups that, group coaching would be around, let's say, groups like parents coming together, small business owners coming together, even groups within an organization. So they may not be essentially within a team, so very under an organizational structure of a team, but they could be like-minded across the board within an organization. So simply put, that is what would be group coaching.
Okay, so it could be a bunch of strangers in theory.
Oh, absolutely. So a group of strangers, let's take, for example, parents. So a group of parents coming together for like-minded reasons. So maybe, parenting adults or parenting young adults or parenting toddlers, or there could be a like-minded group coming for work-life issues. So really speaking, yes, absolutely. There would be strangers coming together because of something that brings them together, which is the interest of the coaching topic, as one would say.
So I have so much questions. Uh, where do we start? How is group coaching? You just mentioned that there's a similar topic or similar audience. So as coaches, we know that like the first most important thing to get done in a coaching conversation is to get to agreement. And a lot of times getting to agreement takes a long time because it's not as easy as it sounds and not as straightforward. So I would imagine with a group that would be much harder. But then again, it sounds like with group coaching, there's kind of pre-agreed agreement a little bit. Is that right?
That's right. So exactly what you said, there would be, when I said, the like-mindedness, so there is an interest put out where a group of folks come together. Having said that, that's where the meaty work of a coach begins, because while you may have set up the intention, this is for coaching young adults, coaching toddlers. For a small business entrepreneur group, it is probably of how do you create business, so business development, or maybe career, my hot topic. So career could be a group coaching. Once you have that like-minded, the real work of a coach begins when the group enters the room and you begin creating that space, because that's when you have to come to an agreement of what that means for each person. So if you take the topic of, say, career, there could be someone coming mid-career crisis. Somebody could be coming due to a job loss, but they are coming for a like-minded topic. How do they come to an agreement of what matters? You know, when we talk about what needs to get accomplished, what would be your measures of success? That would be a group conversation and a group agreement.
So someone had asked, who decides the topic of group coaching? Is it possible? So what I've heard about, for example, is that you can do group coaching on a very specific thing. So for example, like you said, professionals who want to gain the confidence to ask for a raise. Like, is that also possible, or is that too specific?
So that's a great question. I am thinking within organizations. So in the organization that I work in, I think that would be a very neat topic that would become a niche topic as well. So I guess as a coach, I would never say no, never say never. Everything's possible. You would bring a niche topic. However, as a group coach, you do still want agreement, because what that means for each person looks different. And like coaches, we need to understand what does it, what's mattering about that topic for every individual to be invested in the goal setting, the awareness building, the accountability, because just the broad topic could mean very different to everyone. So there is going to be an agreement, even though the topic has been raised as specific as you may want to go, as broad as may be necessary to get the group going. So when we talk about group, I think, Magda, it would be good to even clarify what is a group. A group would be anyone more than one. And if ICF needs to certify it as a group, it needs to be capped at 15. So anything between 2 and 15.
Excellent. And thank you for all the questions, everyone. I will get to them. But I think based on what I'm seeing in the chat, I think what would be a good structure to follow is why don't we go into kind of more definitional stuff first? So maybe let's jump into kind of team coaching versus group coaching, because I get a sense that there's quite a few questions about getting to agreement in a group coaching setting. So my suggestion would be, let's talk about team and systemic coaching and the context. So maybe I'll put up the slide that we prepared. And perhaps after that, we can talk about what happens in a group coaching session. And I think we're going to get even more questions about agreement. Is that all right?
That's excellent, because the more we expand, we just talked about agreement and there are so many questions. So these are great learners. The more we talk about, so how do you create awareness? How do you create an action plan and facilitate growth? There's going to be deeper questions. So absolutely, let's start with the overall.
That's why we're doing an entire course on this, because it's not just super straightforward. All right, so let's continue with, what is the difference between group coaching and team coaching, and how does it all fit in with systemic coaching?
Fantastic. And this is a very self-explanatory slide. So thank you, Magda, for creating this. Systemic coaching, I would say, happens, so systemic, as long as we are alive, at the core, we are part of a system. So systemic coaching covers personal coaching, covers professional coaching. Having said that, teams exist within organizations, which is a system, and group coaching also exists within a system, because like we said, like-minded people, parents, there is a system there. It could be a group of immigrants, there is a system there. So systemic coaching is the overarching body, and within that, team and groups differ, because team is really about the what's the word I'm looking for, the structure, the formal organizational structure of a team. So in an organization, a team would have a leader who has direct reports. That becomes a team. It becomes a nucleus within an organization. team, for those folks on the call who are doing personal coaching, a team could also be a family where there is a structure, a father, a mother, children, they have siblings, so they are siblings. So that becomes a team as well within a system. So that's what a team would be. Then a group would be cutting across the entire system. So when we talked about, let's say, a group of folks within an organization, so they could come from within teams, they could come from within units, but are coming, for the example you gave, for asking for a raise. And so that could cut across all, let's say, job families and unions, could cut across different units, and that would form a group. Is that helpful, Magda? Have I created more questions than answers?
Probably, but that's okay. So for those of you who joined a little bit late, just a quick reminder, Pooja is here for 45 minutes, but this topic is so big. We're not going to pretend to even answer everything because we literally created courses around this so that we can give everybody an opportunity, a chance to explore those further. So last 15 minutes of this webinar, stick around and I can tell you what Coach Arya has on offer, only because this space is so huge. So
and may
yes,
I,
the answer is
Magda,
yes.
And I completely agree with you. So for all of us on this call, everything that we are trying to cover is really drops in the ocean. So when you begin to look at those, they themselves would then become expanded spaces of understanding and learning. So absolutely correct, Magda. Let us create more questions than give answers.
Very coaching answer. I like it. So in that case, let's do another kind of basic one. I've never experienced group coaching, so I'm kind of excited to learn this one. In a group coaching situation, be it with strangers, well, let's focus on strangers because I'm guessing they'll be different. So in a group coaching situation that is composed of like-minded people, but who don't necessarily know each other,
Yes.
what does the structure of the first coaching conversation look like? And are there specific number of interactions that you have as a group? Are there any rules or things to expect on a traditional conversation like that?
Right. So great question. I would suggest, so based on my personal experience, that that pre-work becomes foundational because you have a group coming together. And I think that even applies to team coaching, in my opinion. There needs to be the coach. It would really work for them to be getting into a conversation, getting into a group with some prior understanding of who's in the room. So having those one-on-ones as to what's bringing people together would be beneficial. You know, it takes me back to what you initially said about the benefits of coming into a group. There are kind of a three-tier benefit for everyone across. For individuals who are coming together as a group, they're not just saving on costs of a coach, but really they are getting the benefit of the group dynamic, because they're not just learning from their own wisdom, but they are learning from the group and the group experience. So in order for the coach to be holding that space, they need to understand where each of those participants are coming from. So pre-work important. I would say that depending on the topic, there would be about 4 to maybe 10 max sessions. I would say ideally, when I do group coaching around careers, it is between 3 and then 6 with one-on-ones thrown in, because it's that group understanding that needs to get into an individual understanding. So if that's helpful. I'm wondering if it is a good time to even introduce the benefits of bringing the group together. Magda, just wondering.
Please.
If
for me, this is all new, so I'm excited to learn from what you think is important.
Okay, so I'm hoping some of you may have asked that question, so let's preempt. The advantage for an individual to get into the group, because of the learning style. Some of us are introverted people. We may not want to, and some of us may not be vulnerable. So to get into a room with one-on-one coaching might be intimidating. So the dipping your toes and the soft launch is a group coaching scenario where you learn without being on the spot. So there is that space for all sorts of learning styles as a participant. You learn with group and you make connections, you do networking. So those connections take you through. Secondly, I think for a coach, group coaching is scalability. It is leveraging their time, their efforts, because you're bringing a group together. What you can cover with a group, you can't cover with individuals. For an organization, say for the system, it is again very beneficial because of the scalability. It is also beneficial when they are wanting to break silos. When you have a huge organization, you're breaking silos. You are bringing people from across different teams and across different units, and then bringing them together. When you bring such groups together, at some point in time, they are creating that network and breaking that silo and creating a different culture, which we would prefer calling a coaching culture. So it's a very complementary function together with team coaching. So team coaching can get deeper. This can get more extensive and wider.
Sounds fascinating and super useful. Literally thinking of all the times where I wish that we had group coaching in my various companies, but that's a topic for another day. And I think also an elective you want to do, right? You're going to be looking at coaching within organizations at some point.
Absolutely. So this
I should take that class.
Fascinates me. That fascinates me, that how do you, there is systemic coaching, then there are teams, and then there are groups of people, because people interact in all different ways. So to bring all of that together and really create an ecosystem of coaching would be, in my view, organizational coaching. So really excited to dive into the different facets of coaching within an organization and see how you create an ecosystem.
Very cool. So I'm going to kind of go to some questions, because the last one that's quite relevant. Would the coach meet the members individually before group coaching? So you mentioned that one-on-one coaching should be ideally part of the group experience, but you also mentioned pre-work, and I assume that you meant pre-work both for the coach as well as for the members of the group. So if you could maybe, if this particular example that you could give, that would be great. And if not, can you speak in general terms? What is the kind of pre-work that should be required ideally for the coach and for the group? And when does individual coaching come in a group coaching situation?
So the work for a coach, let's begin from there, is really the needs assessment. So trying to understand that while they have put the topic, so the coach's niche may be out there as a topic, for example, then to start understanding what is the need that brings people in individually, because then you get into the group and make it a collective need. So that's where, from one coaching agreement to many as a collective coaching agreement. So some of the work that the coach needs to start wrapping their head around is, what does this topic that they have put out there mean for people, and who's in the audience? How many different types of learners? There could be visual, there could be auditory, there could be kinesthetic learners, there could be introverts, extroverts, etc. So really gauging what is the temperature of the room by doing that individual work. Then coming to an individual, their pre-work is getting their minds into that particular topic. So setting them up. I'll give you the example of what I do within organizations is more around the careers. So when we look at career, when you're navigating, or career advancement is a different conversation. If it is a career transition, it is a different conversation. So what's that pre-work that is required for people to hone in? when they have to kind of meditate, become mindful of what are they wanting, because till they don't understand, they could start flowing with the group current and the team dynamic there and say, oh yeah, what he's saying makes sense for me. And they lose their entire reason for entering the group coaching function. So when they then uh, take away and come out of it, the coach might be surprised that they didn't really learn anything, because at that point they've kind of lost their individuality. So you have to enable the client as well to start understanding exactly what they want, because you need to ensure that each member of that group takes away what they are wanting from that exercise coming together.
So would you say that in a group setting, the coach becomes more of a facilitator?
Brilliant. I was waiting for that, because that's that thin line of difference between a facilitator and a coach. They are functioning kind of similarly, while a coach would have their own competencies to adhere to. So, the trust building, the presence, the agreement. The facilitator is more about, is the group agreeing to a certain guideline? The coach has to take it a little deeper, and that's where the coaching becomes different from facilitation. So absolutely, Magda, it gets further heightened when you enter into a group scenario. The conversations between a facilitator in the room and the coach in the room.
It sounds hard, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Couple specific questions. What ideally is the length of a group coaching session?
So that's a very good question. Again, I would say it is topic specific. I have seen people, so I would say I do on one topic, like I said, career. I do right from 1 hour, 1.5 hour to half a day. So again, it is for the coach to build this out. What does it look like for them? When I do more of an expanded, so let's say a half a day group coaching, then the number of times we meet will get shortened. If you do a 1 hour, it would get extended, because again, it is what are you intending to take away? And in group coaching, unlike one-on-one, the intention is also set by the group coach. So you do have an intention out there. It's not really a free flow. So what do you want from this conversation today or from this coaching today? It is intended for something. So the coach will have to design what that group looks like. But I would invite every coach on this call to really dance in the moment, leverage their skills and design the group coaching to suit their needs, and see how it's landing for the group. It's all a work in progress. Give yourself the permission to make mistakes and to grow.
So as you're talking, it's occurring to me that I lied. I have been part of group coaching actually many times, because a lot of coach training kind of is that, isn't it?
That is a great segue to one of the biggest advantages of group coaching is what happens after a training. So post training or even during training. So we have certain leadership programs running within organizations. So to your example, coach training, you create group coaching as a way to imbibe, to assimilate the training, the intellectual understanding that people have gotten, and to help them make it their own. Group coaching is a great tool. So every leadership training, I would say leadership program must be, I would say it's a great proposal for organizations to take group coaching as part of a leadership development program.
Which we do, by the way, at Coacharia. I don't know if you even know that in terms of our corporate offering, we do very much group coaching and team coaching. Anyway, another topic for another time because there's so much. Joanne had a really great suggestion. Can Pooja lead us through an example of how she would work with this group? So this group here has a shared desire to learn about group coaching or to become group coaches. So what kind of pre-work would you do for this kind of group, for example?
So you're putting me on the spot, Joanna.
I am.
And
It's my job.
I would say that's a great question. So how I would interpret that is group coaching, there would be skills. So I would put this as part of a training scenario. One would be, let's say, take the example of Coach Arya, since that's the common thread between all of us, bringing us together today. In Coach Arya, you are taking a group coaching or an organizational coaching. You're part of my team in the organizational coaching training. Then we create a group such as this. We create a smaller groups of, let's say, 3, 5, 10, up to 15, and then look at what are the different competencies and how are we going to now assimilate that training and create what it means for each one of us. So I'm not sure if I'm very clear on this. So the group's intention has to become very clear that we are running parallel with the training or on group coaching. Once we do that, then the groups that get formed are going to stay intact throughout that training because we are going to create some team dynamic. We are also intending the underlining current that the group comes together and they become their own network, they become their own support systems. Okay, and that's where we start taking every topic and then creating a group scenario on what does this really mean? What are the challenges that you are facing in understanding, say, the coaching agreement or creating trust within a group of strangers? And we take each of those topics back into this kind of a group and create a deepened learning and understanding. And then what does this mean when we are going to create a certain group coaching scenario for our own team? So that is what I would like this group to look like. Was that helpful, Magda? Did that make sense?
I think so. Maybe Joanne, if she wants to jump in, she can ask more questions. So she also asked after pre-work, so during the first session of a group coaching, what are kind of the high-level steps that you would go through?
So like any other facilitation, and purposely I'm using the word facilitation, you would want to, in the first session, set up certain guidelines. So guidelines as to how we are going to be showing up, because one of the fundamentals of coaching is confidentiality. So what does confidentiality look like for a group of complete strangers coming together? So those would become your first kind of mandatory setting the stage. And then would be the coaching agreement. Yes, we've come together for parenting young adults, for career, but what does that really mean? And then setting that agreement would really become the initial work out of the door, creating guidelines where confidentiality, ethics, professional standards, those become some of the key setting the stage, and then getting into the agreement of what are we going to work together, because now we are going to be staying. I'm going to use the same example that Joanna threw for us. How are we going to stay together throughout the training on group coaching? What is that going to look like? That's what we would do in the first session.
Excellent, very helpful. Mindful of time, so I want to get the big questions in. Someone had asked, what are some do's and don'ts of group coaching? I imagine that it's, again, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. I know I didn't prepare you to, I didn't ask you to make a list. We can maybe make it later, but top of your head, since you've done a lot of group coaching and individual coaching, what are some things that you've noticed that, are extra challenges? And, based on that, do you change your approach when you're doing group work versus individual? What are some do's and don'ts you apply for yourself?
So one of the biggest, I think, one of the biggest aspects that I would say stay mindful is that you are upping the game from one to so many. And in doing that, you have to start paying attention. So one of the do's is the confidentiality. One of the do's is staying true to coaching and not getting into advising, into consulting, because facilitation is about about the topic, the expert in the room. Whereas in group coaching, one of the biggest do's is be a coach, and biggest don'ts is don't make it about the topic, make it about the people. Because coaching is about the people. It isn't solving the problem. It is looking at how are people going to be empowered to be facing the topic for which they've come to. So I would like to keep that at that higher level, because as we agreed, our agreement today was we are going to keep it top level and get into the weeds when we do some group coaching through Coacharya, through organizational coaching programs. So all of that would cover. But fundamentally, you will need to stay true to coaching and be a coach. And that's the do's. The don'ts are don't show up anything other than a coach.
Love it. So that kind of begs the question, can any coach be a group coach?
Yes. Join the program on group coaching at Coacharya, and absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question, because I would encourage all coaches who are also into personal coaching, so life coaches, health coaches. So if you take, say, health as an example in personal coaching, you could do group coaching, because as we said, the benefits are scalability. It is a great way to leverage your coach's time, resources. It is a great way where you cover so many people who may not have the resources to do one-on-one coaching and may not even benefit, because, in things like health, I run when I do have a group running with me. Otherwise, I have tens of excuses not to run, you see. So there are those advantages of group coaching. So absolutely,
I'm allergic to running, so I can't relate to that.
Okay, so yoga. I would rather do yoga with a group. Yeah.
Just
so absolutely, all coaches out there, if you have an interest in group coaching, absolutely. You may want to pick up the particular skills it requires as a group, because you've got to stay true to all your competencies. So yes, I think it would be a great start to take those training programs.
No, so it sounds like, I just want to clarify to everybody, I didn't prompt that question, so we weren't like, hey, Pooja, let's sell our programs. Obviously, everybody, please join. Very happy to have you. But it just sounds to me like you need to really be a good coach before you can really be a good group coach.
Yes. And you want to give yourself the permission to do some coaching before you dive into group coaching, because you want to start understanding what you can and cannot do as a coach before you get into a group scenario, because you are finally, there is a lot of power in a group dynamic. So to be able to hold that space, it needs to vibrate. So I would say, yes, you want to feel comfortable in the skin of a coach before you take on that space as a group coach.
So speaking of group dynamics, in every group there's going to be someone who's more vocal, and you mentioned that, an advantage of group coaching, for example, could be because if you're not vulnerable enough to open up to an individual in a group, you may feel like, okay, well, others are going through this too, maybe I can speak up. For example, I would never say that I would try to jeopardize a conversation, but if there's quiet, I'm probably going to speak up because it's just who I am as a human. My poor parents had to deal with this for 40 years now. So does that happen frequently in group coaching, and how do you deal with it?
Oh, absolutely. So again, when we talked about how does a coach pay attention to it, they would need to, from one person that they're dealing with one-on-one, they got to stay present. That's the presence of the group coach, where they have to stay present to the fact that there's somebody in the room from your corner of the eye who is staying quiet. There's somebody who is tearing up. There's somebody who is being very vocal only because they are an extrovert or would want to fill in the silence. And as a coach, we understand the power of silence. So how are you going to enable and dig into and get the voices in the room? And that's why you've got to pay attention to the different learning styles. Your entire space has to have a little bit of the visual, a little bit of the kinesthetic, experiential, a little bit of the intellectual to bring the voices in the room. Sometimes you might need to share stories and make it storytelling, narrative coaching to bring those voices. So again, the attention of a coach will have to get heightened. I think the biggest point for a great group coach is how do you make that space vulnerable? Because we all know as coaches, vulnerability is at the core of learning. If you open up, there's that breakthrough. I've had groups because see, career is a very professional topic, but is very personal. So if you can bring tears, if you can bring people's silences, if we become comfortable that a person is silent, not because they hate the group coaching, what's going on, but it's really mattering to them, then you see that there will be breakthroughs happening.
I
I'm
think there
reading
are
that
more
question.
questions. Yeah. Do you want to address that? Because I'm just mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes left, and
Okay.
we've had quite a few questions on agreement before. So I'm wondering if you could maybe just talk about some challenges around agreement, and then maybe just wrap things up. And we can pick this up on the blog because I want all the questions answered. And we have a few different coaches who are working on group and team and systemic type programs. So every question will get answered, I promise. What do you think, Pooja? How do you want to use the last
On
5 minutes?
on the topic of agreement, as a coach, we may have all learned at different levels of our coach training that agreements is contract, contract, and contract. So, you have the ABC of coaching, as they say. So agreement has to be something that happens overarching and then happens every time we meet. So as a group, there is so much of emphasis, and yes, my heart goes out to every coach, group coach, that you got to dive into agreement at every given moment of the group coaching. It never goes away. You've got it, you've parked it, it never happens. It's the overarching, it happens in every session. So that's the little I want to just say. And so I would want to leave it at that, because that's something I think we need deeper dive into and more of the experience for this group around what that might look like. I would like to say, I just saw one question pop up on how do you encourage a person who's shy? I would say the pre-work that's the importance of pre-work, because that's when you make a note to yourself that this person or these people might take a little more time to come into the room. I've had people who come away and then write you an email telling you how it mattered to them. And then you take their permission at the next point and share their story anonymously. And that gives them the permission to slowly come into, because finally shyness is working through your own barrier. There's a certain belief that is making them shy. So as a coach, you are breaking that down as well. So that's just answering that question. I'm not too sure. How do we want to approach the next, let's say, 4 minutes?
Any other burning questions, everyone, that we want to answer live? I'll just scroll through chat quickly, but maybe in the meantime, I'll bring back the slide that we had earlier, because a few people have asked for that as well. And we can also talk about this once Pooja leaves. Anyone, any other questions? Maybe, okay, here's one. Someone had asked about coaching models. Are there specific models that are used in group coaching, for example, that aren't used in individual coaching, or just more specific to group coaching? Anything come to mind?
No, I think, and I would not want to say there's certain specific, because for all of those, one-on-one coaches, I want to give you the strength to and the courage to dive into group coaching. What the models that inform your coaching can be then expanded to groups. So I want to encourage every individual one-on-one coach here to build your courage and curiosity to get into group coaching. Use those models, see how those work.
Excellent. So I think we should wrap things up. There are some requests for repetition, but I'll just remind everybody that we will be putting this video on our YouTube channel, as with all of our webinars. So search for Coacharia on YouTube, or just go to youtube.com/C/Coacharia, and you will see, and subscribe, and you will see all our videos there. And what's really cool, YouTube launched a new feature where it lets us bookmark places in a video. So what we can do with this video is we can actually bookmark each question, so you can directly forward to the answer that you want. So we will do that for you.